Mercius today, president of Leading Edge Consulting. Clay and I have been partners now for a couple of years. We're on the block. The reason why he's invited to be a panelist on the How to Prevent Your Nuclear Verdict webinar is Clay's had y'all's job before. He's thought about this long and hard, how to prevent, and is now out consulting, doing this and helping carriers build that line. So we always like to start with, hey, how real is this, Clay? You've been watching the stats coming up from ATRI recently released reports of the American Transportation Research Institute. Said over the last decade, there was 299 nuclear verdicts. They're defining as a case worth over $1 million. But as we know, hey, that's what's getting the headlines. There's also just literally claims that they're turning and ballooning bigger than they need to be. So how can we prevent all of this mess from happening? So Clay, to help tease people, get them excited why they should show up with us on March 25th, give us a quick little insight. How do we avoid these little things from ballooning up into bigger than they should be?
Yeah, Scott. Yeah, I appreciate the time to be able to chat with everyone today too, and talk about this because it is a big issue in the transportation industry. It's really blown, like you said, up over the last 10 years or so. One of the first things that I always like to do when I talk to potential clients or with my clients is, really setting up those right hiring policies and procedures and practices. So we want to make sure that, we have set guidelines for minimum hiring guidelines. And, we stick to those hiring guidelines. It doesn't change according to the circumstances that we're in, or, and if our fleet or our truck count is empty, then we're, laxing those guidelines or not. We stay consistent with those policies. The other thing that's really important is once you hire a driver, they're with you, but you still have to continue to look at their performance and ensure that they're still meeting those minimum hiring guidelines. So once they get in the fold, doesn't mean that, the can opens up and now anything and everything is a go. So we want to make sure that we're staying consistent with those minimum hiring guidelines, even after they're employed with us. And then one of the other important steps and critical steps is setting up our policies and procedures that are consistent with the regulations. So I'll see some carriers set up some guidelines and policies that are either below the minimum standards within the requirements because they're not really taking into consideration, the federal guidelines and the state guidelines when they set up their policies and procedures. They're trying to think about, are we a flexible type company and can we work with people? That's great, but we got to make sure that we're meeting at least minimum guidelines and rules when we set up those policies. And then finally is, when the bad case happens, because unfortunately we're all going to be exposed to that, the probability and likelihood is there. So we really need to prepare our corporate witnesses for those depositions. And what I mean by that is, that corporate witness needs to be able to articulate all of the things that we do, safety, policies, practices, even our operational procedures, because we tend to do a good job of sharing that with our drivers, but we really don't pat ourselves on the back and give ourselves all the credit for all the work that we do every single day when it comes to deposition time. And, depositions are probably one of the most difficult things to go through because, it's a tough environment. We're in front of the judge, we're in front of attorneys, we're nervous, but to be able to really relax and articulate the way that we present ourselves as a company and all the things that we do, training, education, and policies and procedures are so important.
So you've said it, Clay, part of being relaxed is because you're prepared. And when you're prepared, it's because you just know your point's cold. It's like any big presentation, right? Whatever you got to present to the boss or you're presenting to a client, what drives nerves is how prepared you are. Borrowing a sports analogy, if it's game 7, if you've never been there before, you're probably pretty nervous. And if you've been preparing for that moment, or it's not the first time you've done it, you're able to kind of knock it cold. So it sounds like it's a balance, Clay, of not bragging. You still have some humble pie, but it's the confidence to say, look, this is what we do. We go above and beyond and not being shy to show it. How do you get every person singing from the same sheet of music, Clay?
Yeah, so what I do and what I've done in the past is I create a binder for every single case. Every case is different. We've got to spend a lot of time and energy and effort on that case because, like we said, potentially it's a lot of money that's coming out of the corporation or going to affect our insurance policies. So what I do is I don't try to memorize everything. I can't remember everything that we do. So as I'm working through that case and preparing for that case in the weeks before, I'm writing down notes, and then I'm putting that into a binder when I get my deposition notice. I'm outlining that in my deposition notice in a binder, so when I'm in court and I'm sitting there looking at stuff, it's not a memory trial. It's, hey, what do we do as a corporation? So I could refer to my notes while I'm sitting there in deposition to make sure I address all of the training policies, procedures, and practices that we have.
Right, makes sense. You don't need to memorize, multiple tables because, for back to fifth grade, we've got calculators for that. You don't need to memorize, what the capital of Ohio is. You've got Google for that. So why would you memorize, the stuff, right? Just need to know where to find it. Yeah,
exactly.
And then, going back to your first point, play of documentation and best practices, right? So it's funny. It sounds like a no-brainer, but when you're trying to create a culture of inclusion, hey, we're going to help work with you. We're going to help turn you better individual, better professional, except, hey, we're in a regulated industry. So there are some bare minimums, and it seems like an ABC, but apparently you've seen enough people that have forgotten that.
That's right. Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a society that we really want to help everyone as much as we can, which is awesome, and it's great. But we got to make sure that we're meeting those minimum guidelines and requirements, whether it's state or federal.
And that's where we've had good luck, or I shouldn't say good luck because we made our own luck. Working together is that, we say engineering our risk away. And so when we lock it into our hiring, it's not just writing it down on a piece of paper. You and I know if it's a standard operating procedure, and it's in a manila folder, that's a good place for it not to get followed.
Right.
But if it's in what you do every day, if it's in your hiring software and it's a requirement that need to meet a standard, you can't hit the approve button. Now that's how you engineer the risk away. So it's scalable. Whoever's making that decision knows, as opposed to making sure that they remember to dust off that manila folder every time they bring someone on board.
That's right. Yeah. And it keeps that, maybe those administrative people that aren't as focused or knowledgeable on the regulations, it helps keep them in compliance and not make those exceptions that would happen with a paper-based type file. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to what we said. You don't need to know everything, so don't make them think. And your people are going to be more efficient, less clicking, less thinking.
Right.
And they can focus on the individual as opposed to memorizing the rules and regulations.
Absolutely.
Lord knows FMCSA 391 and everything else in the Green Book is, it's not memorable. You can't memorize it, right?
That's right. It's not, and it's changing. I always talk about it being the Green Bible, but the Bible doesn't change. Unfortunately, federal and state rules change all the time. Yeah.
That's right. Well, Clay, I appreciate it. We're looking forward to having you on March 25th. So kickoff, everyone, is noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We hope to have you. We're going to have a bunch of great panelists beyond Clay, talking about it from a claims management perspective. We're going to talk it from the insurance, from the legal standpoint. This is not an accident. These claims are on the rise. This is a very measured attack from plaintiffs' attorneys. So we're going to help everyone get there and build that defense. Clay, thanks for the time.
Yeah, appreciate it, Scott. Thank you.